anybody ever tell you that. Don't. Yeah.
All right.
Your friend was being mean.
Yeah, I gotta send Crystal a message then because it was Crystal. No, I'm only kidding. Yeah. She's just like, I didn't even know you then. What are you trying to do? Blame me for stuff?
Yeah.
Like, no.
Yeah.
First thing I'm gonna say is, did you have a good weekend?
Yes, I did. It's kind of technically still the weekend because it's Labor Day weekend, so it's an extra long, great weekend.
I want to ask you, did you sip on Grey Goose whiskey? Did you get a little bit tipsy?
Hey, I did drink a little bit of whiskey, so no Grey Goose, but a little bit of whiskey.
So you're not even following your song. You're not even doing what your song says. Come on now.
And honestly, it's like usually provincial vodka now instead of Grey Goose. So.
Yeah. So when you go up to perform it on stage, you're gonna have to change. It's like you change the lyrics. People are like, I thought it was Grey Goose. What is she doing? Why don't you change the lyrics? And
Pretty
then
much.
Crystal looks at you as if to go like, yeah, we didn't go over this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think it's funny because I was actually having a conversation with Crystal.
Okay.
And you know Crystal, and I was like, Crystal, you'll never guess who we got on. She was like, who do you have on? I was like, okay, first, Lose the Attitude. And she's like, don't tell me what to do. I was like, okay, that's fair.
Yeah, that sounds like Crystal.
And then I told her, she's like, yeah, she owes me money. And I was like, oh, for real? Does she owe you money? And she's like, no, you're so gullible. I was like, women are mean.
That's what we do.
Yeah, I sent her the Joey women are mean. She was like, yeah, okay, you're gullible. I was like, all right, whatever, Crystal, whatever.
That's awesome.
But yeah. I want to ask you, because there's a lot to cover. We're going to try to get it through the next 45 minutes or so. Now, I am not a child prodigy, but when I look at some of the facts here that you've got in your bio, I was like, man, age 2 singing. And it was like, if I look at it here, I'm just making sure I've got age 6 guitar. And then age 9 writing songs. It's like, I will make the reference to anyone who ever comes on that says they write songs when they're like below 15. What are you writing about at 9?
Honestly, you know what? For me, the first song I ever recall writing was my great grandpa was sick, and we were going to visit him. And I think it was when we came back. So they live in BC, that side of the family, and so we went to go see him kind of before he was really ill. And coming home, I was just like kind of imagining life like without him, and I was just in a really emotional state. And I sat down and started writing a song. I think it was called Without You. Okay. Yeah. So, yep, at 9 years old.
Yeah, that's deep. I mean, that's a little bit deep. I told Robin Adelini when she was on, I was like, because again, I feel like all you guys start writing young, and if you're passionate about it, great. But I was like, man, when I was maybe 13, and I was like, man, what do I want to do with my life? I think I sat down and wrote one song, and then realized I don't play guitar, I can't sing. So I was like, oh yeah, well, I'll sell this to someone. And then they're like, oh yeah, let me hear it. And I'm like, on a cold, dark night, hanging on a half pipe. And they're like, oh,
you're like reciting a poem.
Yeah. And they're like, oh man, that sounds great. What else do you got? I'm like, that's literally all it. And they're like, we gave you a year. I was like, nothing really happened in the year. So I kind of stopped.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that.
Yeah. I feel like there's going to be one day that I'll finish it. And they'll be like, when did you start this? I'm like, oh, I started at 16 and finished it at 40. And then it's like, but no one ever took it. And then like someone's like, oh, well, that sounds like a songwriter to me. I'm like, no. I'm not saying that I wrote other songs. I'm saying that it took that long to write this one song. They're like, we can't sign you. You suck. I'd be like, that's fair. It's fair.
You can have like 100 songs in your catalog and they're still like, we won't sign you.
Yeah. I want to ask you too, because like, again, like when you're at, I believe you said, or I said it was age 3 or whatever that you started singing, like, did you sing before you could talk? Was it almost like one of those things where it was like, okay, I want you to say mom and dad. Mom, dad. Like, is something wrong with her? Why is she singing to us?
Honestly, yeah. Well, my parents said that like when I was really young, and it's funny because until you start seeing like your own nieces and nephews like kind of go through those kind of, I don't know, those stages, like when they start to talk, when they start to laugh, like those kinds of things. I didn't really understand because they were like, oh, you had such good diction, such good pronunciation at like 2.5 years old. And like, then you were singing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, like my middle. So I've got 2 older brothers, the middle child, he was in singing lessons and he'd come home and he'd be rehearsing and practicing. I think he was even taking piano. And I was just like, la, 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 like singing and making up my own songs and wanted to be like the center of attention all the time. So they were like, okay, well, we'll put her in singing lessons.
Yeah. Did you say you were the youngest?
Yeah, I'm the baby of the family.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. No, I feel you. I have 2 older brothers, and it's like when we go back and look at home videos, it's like, I'm sure when you're younger, they're like, oh yeah, it's like, we love Brian. It's like, and then when you're older, like, man, you took so much goddamn attention away from us. I'm like, I'm 3. Relax.
Yeah, I know.
I didn't know.
It's so funny. We were just, I don't know, my mom just came across some like Christmas home videos, and I must have been like 3 or 4. And it's so funny because we're still all kind of the same. Like my oldest brother's, he'll speak his mind and be like blunt and kind of get to the point. And then my middle brother, he just like doesn't say anything. He's very like, but then he'll kind of have that little sparkle in his eye where he's being a little mischievous, but it's very like sneakily. And then I'm just out there, like, I'm just like, blah, blah, blah. And like home videos, like we're all still like that. It's just funny that like we were like that when we were so little, and we're all still like that.
Yeah. It's funny because when you're mentioning about this, it's kind of like, I guess, kind of eerie, because I was just finding out old VHSs, and we put them on like DVDs, and I was like, okay, well, now I have a MacBook, and I was trying to do something for this podcast for like when I turn 30, which is like in October, and I wanted to do just something like a little bit fun. And I was like, oh, let's go back and look at some VHSs, but you can't, they're on CDs. So then I had to convert it from a CD to, putting it on whatever format. So I'm going through it, and I see like Christmas concerts, and I was like, this is good stuff. So I upload on Facebook, tagged a whole bunch of my high school friends.
Nice.
And then they thought it was interesting. But like the one thing that I will still hold against anyone that says this is, we had one girl, and the song is From the Tip of Your Nose to Your Big Fat Toes. And you see the whole crowd, like everyone that we graduated with, go down and touch their feet. This girl was like way ahead of us. What did she do? She just took her back leg, put it up back. So we look like we're all bowing. And she's just like, yeah, you guys are losers. I'm just going to take my leg. And I was just like, okay. And then, of course, when you're
innovative.
Yeah. And then, of course, when you're that young, like your parents are dressing you up top notch for like a graduation. So then you see me and this other dude just like, we're supposed to be performing. And I'm just like, no, it's like, your tie's not right. It's like, yeah, well, you had a bow tie. And you just see 2 of us just like messing around with each other's stuff. I'm like, we were really into fashion. It's like, no, we were just clueless. And we just thought like, yeah, parents are here to see us, but screw it.
And also just like defying, like I remember being young, and especially with the guys in our class, like just do the opposite of what the teacher says all the time.
Yeah. I think it was funny because like when we were younger and we were allowed to pick where you seat or whatever when you're like in the younger grades. So you have the girls that want to sit next to girls, guys. And Brian did not think that way. Brian was like, there's a whole row of girls there. I'm just going to tag and then like years later, now it's like, if you see a girl, it's almost like, hey, Brian, you're going to go talk to, it's like, they're having drinks, let them alone. It's like, you can just go over and say hello. I'm just like, no, see, my peak was when I was 8. And I was like, that
so was my confidence right there. Like you're like trying to like channel your inner 8-year-old.
Yeah. I'm just like, see, at 8, the worst that could happen is the girl says, ew, Brian. And then that defeats you for like 5. For 5 minutes, you're like, oh my God. But like as an older person, hey, can I get you a drink? It's like, no, we're good. I'm just like, it's like, all around me are familiar faces. You're just like, okay.
The anxiety like creeps in.
Yeah. And I feel now with COVID and stuff, it's just that much worse. It's like, it's like, hey, you're not in my inner circle. I'm like, oh, I was never in your inner circle. It's like, relax.
Dude, I know. And even just like the amount of time we've all spent at home and just like not done anything. And now going back out into the world and like doing things, it's like, how do I act?
I have moments where even before COVID, and I'm sure this is like on Instagram and people have posted it, but it's like you're walking in the street and you forget what you do with your hands or your arms. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, I know someone that I graduated with, and you're walking down the street, you're like, swing your arms. Oh, wait, don't swing your arms.
Yeah. Like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
You become hyper aware of like every limb on your body. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to ask too, because I thought this was actually really interesting when we were doing a little bit of research here. I tell people I don't like to do a lot of research because if I'm wrong, it's like, well, blame it on the internet. But if I'm right, it's like great for me. But like I realized that it said here that like you were actually The Voice, like they wanted you to audition for The Voice like twice or many times, and you basically said no. Now, I as a podcaster like that kind of idea of someone being like, hey, it's like, go on here and this will help you. And you're like, no, screw that. I know what I'm doing. Leave me alone. But like, how hard was that to kind of do? Because there's lots of acts I'm sure are told, hey, why don't you audition? And then
And I would say I'd like kind of split it down the middle a little bit there. Like I wanted to, but it was also like I was in the middle of working with a team. We were kind of on a path. We were, you know, I had a couple of record label showcases and there were some things happening that I was pretty content. Like this was the first time The Voice reached out to me. I was pretty content with where I was at. I was like, I had a phone call with her and she even said like, oh, you're in Canada. That makes it really difficult. Like, let me know when you're in the US. And I was kind of like, no, it's like, that's okay. Like I'm kind of happy with where I'm at right now. Since then I've auditioned for both. I haven't auditioned for The Voice. I have been approached again by them. But I've auditioned for American Idol, for casting producers and stuff. It's always interesting when you like look at the pros and cons of being on a show like that. Just for me, I've been in the business side of the music business for so long, and just knowing like what that looks like winning one of those shows isn't always super glamorous, and TV makes it out to look like super glamorous, but it's just, there's always like pros and cons with anything like that. Like, you know, you get signed into a deal that might not be like completely in your favor. I don't know, because I've never been there, but like you hear stories. So
well, no, it's fair. And like, I feel like I'm not saying it out of the cuff here because they've said it on their own episodes, but like the New Law brothers went down and they auditioned for, I think it was The Voice. It was America's Got Talent. But they weren't allowed to tell people because it was like, you know, well in advance. And then I was like, oh, like I always am skeptical of live TV or like, you know, how they get these things done. And I believe one of them was like, yeah, they told me to tune a guitar. They told the other one to start pacing around. I'm like, okay, so they're making this look like you guys are nervous. Like, yeah, we just wanted to sit there. It's a show.
Yeah, like even when I was auditioning last year for American Idol, I got pretty far with the producers and they were they were like asking for my sob story, like asking what was like wrong in my life. You know,
you should have been like, you're like, I don't know, I somehow got here. And then they're like, yes. And you're just like, okay, I know. Well, I'm a great actor.
Yeah. Honestly, it's just like, it's just interesting because it's a show. People want entertainment. They want something to like grasp onto. People like stories. They like to see a story develop. So I don't think what they're doing is wrong. I think they're catering to their audience and they know what people like and what they want to see. They want to see drama. They want to see the sob story, you know? So it just makes it harder for some of us who've just been doing music their whole life and like just been grinding at it. Like I haven't had a whole lot of tragedy in my life, you know?
It's interesting that you said that because it's like, I'll look back now after kind of getting older and seeing how things work. But like, there's ones of America's Got Talent when, of course, they had like the original cast, I'll call it on. And there's one where it's like one lady like flips out at Simon and it's like, I'm going to be huge. And then she like runs out and like she sucked. Let's put it that way. But I was just like, okay, now I'm looking and being like, did they pay her to be like, listen, you're not going far here, but we can make this look like you're going to be trending for years, or like you're going to be big if we do that.
And it's even funny because I think that was like even bigger like years ago where they do that on these shows. Cause now I feel like they've kind of veered away from that and they really are looking more for like talent and trying to entertain their viewers with talent rather than just like that random drama.
It's still funny to me to watch some of these shows where it's like, I think it's like the golden buzzer. Like I feel like we're in a world where social media, where it's a lot of negativity as it is. So even if you're positive, someone's going to be negative. But sometimes I look at like the golden buzzer. I'm like, okay, I get it that the 6-year-old sang great, but really you gave her the golden buzzer over this crowd. And it's like, are you picking on a 6-year-old? I'm like, no. And then it's like, look at this guy picking on a 6-year-old. How ruthless. I'm like, all right, we're already down the rabbit hole.
She just got like brownie points for being cute and being 6, you know?
Exactly. It's like God. I want to ask you too, because in discussing all this as well, like, did you ever feel at times, because like you said, with say American Idol, The Voice, like you don't necessarily have to win all the time to get that exposure. But I feel like the winner sometimes is like a double-edged sword. It's like, great, you won. But the other side of things is when you get older, and I'm sure you get it within the music industry, it's like, okay, well, now we got to make an album for you. It's like, okay, great, I got all my songs. It's like, we don't like those songs. We're going to help you write your songs. And you're like, no, I don't want it.
Sometimes it's just like losing a little bit of that creative control, I think, when you sign a deal. And that's not even just with these shows. Like, it's really hard nowadays to find a team that sees your vision and sees, you know, just kind of and is willing to let you have that creative control. You don't hear a lot of artists talk about that anymore, which is kind of scary in this business.
Yeah. Like my go-to examples, I think, which is, I guess, somewhat interesting. And then some people will be like, geez, how old is this guy? But it's like, you know, Kesha for me, like when Kesha first came out and I was at like university, I was like, oh, it's like, I was like, there's so much potential there, but these songs don't do it for me. And then when she came out with the thing where it's like Praying or whatever the one was, and this was like post-free Kesha, I was like, that's what I always knew she could be. And it's not like I'm a music producer go like, damn.
I feel like Gaga was kind of like that too. Like like it was just like this like radio pop that I feel like, you know, producers were like pushing on her. And then every once in a while I'd like hear someone like, damn, she can sing. Like, and it's just like, you know, like some of it's just like robotic, you know, and it's, you wonder. Well,
it's like, for me, it was like Poker Face was big when I was in like high school.
Right. Yeah.
But then like when I started, and again, like I was like, I still like her, but then when she started doing more, like, I guess it was Shallow and other like
well,
other
just like the ballads that showed off her ability. I was like, okay,
she's a great singer. The other one that I think is interesting, which when I grew up and I kind of didn't like, was like Nicki Minaj. And then when I was like, because I just didn't get it. Like, and there's still songs today that I'll be like, okay, Nicki, calm the F down.
Chill. Yeah.
But like, if you listen to The Night Is Still Young, Marilyn Monroe, like, I'm just like, this is what I want, Nicki. And it's like, yeah, but these ones better. I'm like, you know what? I'm not there. You do what you got to do.
Well, and that's the weird spot to be in as an artist, because you have your team telling you what like radio wants and what like what's commercial, what's going to like hit commercially. And then there's like their authentic true self where they want to like be more artistic and like put something out that's more true to them. And you always see when that happens. Like, you know, even Brett Eldredge, I know like he was putting out a lot more like radio commercial stuff for, I think, his label. Like, and now like he just put out an album, I guess it would have been last summer. And they're just like, it sounds like him. Like he's kind of back to that Sinatra sort of like, you know, in his feelings sort of vibe. And it's just like, it just sounds like him. Now, is it getting played on the radio? No, but it sounds like he's doing what he loves. So isn't that all that matters?
Like, it's just weird because when you think about the whole dynamic of it, it's like, you know, record companies or labels, and like, yeah, you can give them the credit for success. Like, no one's taking that away from them, but it's like, all right, but like, there's a fan base out there that's like, well, now this sounds like this and this sounds like this. And then they're like, well, that's going to happen with every generation. Like, fair. But if you just let them kind of do their own thing, it's like everyone kind of wins in that sense, because the artist gets the exposure for being themselves. Like the label gets the exposure for say, hey, like you found this talent or whatever, but like you're letting them be themselves, and that brings in more. Like, I think it's interesting now in a time frame where you see artists like Ed Sheeran, for example. When I was in university, I wasn't listening to a whole lot of Ed Sheeran. I stumbled across it and I was like, oh, like now I like Ed Sheeran. But then to see him now with his manager produce their own label, sign artists, I'm like, okay, this is interesting. Are we going down the dynamic of you're going to let Macy Peters be herself? Or is it almost like, let's Macy be Macy? But then like if the album doesn't do well, it's like, okay, Macy, here's how Ed Sheeran became. And I'm like, no, let her figure it out. Like, relax.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard because there's a point of like development for artists. Like, you want to help them grow, but it's like sometimes you help them, like a label or managers and stuff can help them grow to be something that they're not. And then they get down that road and they're like, how do I get back to what I wanted to do initially, you know? So
I think it's like, to me, a good example for me now, someone could argue not, but it's like Miley seemed to be going through, like, for Miley Cyrus to me was almost like that whirlwind of like, all right, when Miley comes out as Hannah Montana, I'm like, okay, this is her rise. And then she was doing pop, and I was like, okay, like I kind of get what you're going for, because people relate you to Hannah.
And she was young, like she was so young.
And then it's like country. I was like, okay, this is the Miley that I appreciate a little bit more. And then next minute it's like, It's like pop, bop, like and then it's like wrecking ball. I was like, what happened to you? I was like, do you need to time out,
like,
Miley?
I honestly think that she was like kind of rebelling to find her true self because she was like told what to do all the time, like, and then that pressure of like Billy Ray Cyrus being her dad and being this like country icon and like then that was like why she kind of like went into the country realm because I think that was just like that pressure. There was just always all these influences in her life, and I think her like kind of doing the whole twerking phase and just like being a little crazy was like her being like, no, I'm gonna be myself. So
it's funny because for me, and there's probably like a whole generation, it's funny to look back on generations and think, okay, like what was their point where they didn't know this? But like I remember watching like Hannah Montana and looking at the dad, I'm like, man, like all right. And then like you'd see the Billy Ray Cyrus like achy breaky heart, and I'm like, all right, whatever happened to that guy? And then someone would like do the whole like span slowly to you and be like, that's the same guy. I'm like, no, it's not. And I'm like, oh shit, like okay. But then there's a whole generations out there that if you mentioned Beyonce and you're like, yeah, Beyonce, Destiny's Child, they're like, what's a Destiny's Child? You're like, I have to leave. I know I'm too old.
Other than walking out of this room,
it's like okay. It's like when you go to a party with your friends and they're like slightly 2 or 3 years younger than you, but they know younger people, and you go like, all right, I'm gonna test this out at a party. Justin Timberlake, where did he come from? They're like, Justin Timberlake was always Justin Timberlake. Okay, so that's strike one. Nick Carter, anybody? They're like, who's Nick Carter? I'd be like, that's strike two. Okay, the big one. I'd be like, all right, so Hannah Montana or Miley Cyrus. Someone would be like, I don't know who those are. I'm like, whoa, I am out of here.
I'm gone. See you later.
But I want to ask you, of course, now with during COVID, because I don't know because I kind of kept up with you, I guess in the new year, because of course I was looking at acts and I was like, it's like we tried to reach out. We were trying to set this up. Yeah, we were trying, but things get moved around, which is fine. But I want to ask you, was it pre-COVID or post-COVID that you actually made your move to Nashville?
It was like mid-COVID when I made my move to Nashville. I moved in October last year. So like I started my visa, like I was looking into visas and kind of talking to lawyers and stuff before COVID hit, which is why I kind of was like, well, I don't want to put this on hold. I don't want to, and it actually in a weird way, kind of like, because I was working as an educational assistant. That was kind of my day job back in Canada. And when COVID hit and I lost my job and all that stuff, it kind of gave me like, I mean, I was broke, but like it gave me a moment to kind of like sit down, figure out what I want to do and if I was going to make this move. So having that time to like sit and actually get my visa kind of all together, getting all the information together from my lawyer and stuff, like it was a kind of a blessing in disguise. And I know like COVID hit so many people so hard and it's still affecting so many people. And I've been lucky, like it's been just a blessing in disguise, kind of like one after another, and just sort of worked out for me and made the move here in October and recorded another song and put it to radio, and just, like everything's just been kind of like, it's been a hustle and it's been a grind, but everything's been working out. So I've been very lucky.
It's like when, in my mind, it's almost like the episode of Friends where like, I think it's like Chandler and Rachel doesn't want, like, she wants to quit the coffee house, but then like she quits and she wants to go back, and it's like, you and your fear. It's like, don't blame the fear. It's like, why don't you quit your job? It's like, because I'm too afraid of the fear. And it's, that's how I look at that situation. Because there are times where you're like, okay, I kind of like the stability, but it's not what I want to do. But then it's almost like, well, if I give up the stability, then it's all just, okay, where the hell do I go from here?
I've like always been the person that is like wanting to push out of my comfort zone and be like out of stability. So I'm just like a very unique person that way, where I'm not afraid of like trying something new and just pushing out of my comfort zone, especially when it comes to my music. Like I'm so dedicated to my music that like, at one point moving to Toronto, my team at the time was living there, and I was like, yeah, I'll move to Toronto. And I didn't have a job, didn't have anything going on. I just moved, and it was like a little hard for a while, but it was, I don't know, it's just like experiences and adventure, like And then when I moved back to Saskatchewan, that's kind of when I was like, okay, the next move is Nashville. And I started working on that, was, you know, like getting ready for that for about a year. And then COVID hit. And I think that was like the perfect kind of like, I don't know, obstacle that like could have been like, oh, I'm going to stay in the stability. I'm going to
like a crossroads.
Yeah. And it was a bit of a test. I feel like it was like, do you keep just sitting here and like waiting and staying in the stability and being in a comfort zone? Or do you just like push through the ultimate comfort zone of moving in the middle of a pandemic to another country?
Yeah. So like, I know with like country music, obviously it's kind of like, it'd be a silly question to say. I was going to be like, well, why Nashville? But yeah, we get why it's Nashville. But like, how do you make those, I guess for other people out there that maybe are in similar boats, but how do you like make that connection? Because I know with like Canadian acts, you can be on Canadian radio, get your like, I think we had like the CCMA Ontario Awards. So like the other night, but it's like, you know, that's great. You can still be recognized in Canada and people will love you, like Brett Kissel, for example. But it's like to try to break it, and like Dean Brody is another one, but it's like to try to break it into like the US market can be hard. I believe Dean said, like, I remember interviews that I do, just like snippets of them, and people are like, what's wrong with you? I'm just like, I just remember what they said. But I think
that's amazing.
Like in Dean's one, he was like, man, it's like, it's really tough to break it into Nashville because like you can be a hit wherever you go, like say Canada, wherever you're from, but then like Nashville has its own kind of beast mentality of like, hey, we want you to make a song like this, and you're like, man, like what about if I don't want to make a song like that? But how do you find it like in Nashville? Because obviously you get the exposure of country music, you get to see acts come and walk through, other up and coming acts itself, like I believe like Tennille Arts is another one that's kind of right. So like, and then when you team up with these people don't realize the backstory of you could be two very successful people in music. And they're like, have you ever teamed up again? It's like, yeah, we were performing at bars like 10 years ago.
I've known Tennille my whole life. Like we're both from Saskatchewan. So we like grew up. I remember like listening to her sing like a Milan, like Disney song at a competition in Saskatchewan years ago. Like we were both on Telemiracle, which is like a fundraising TV, you know, thing. And it's just like, it's funny. Like, and we both like knew each other were super talented and we're going to, you know, one of us was going to do something one day. And it's funny because every year that she'd come home for like SCMAs after she'd moved to Nashville, she'd always be like, you need to come. And it'd be very encouraging that way. And it's so cool to see, you know, she's at a #1 and it's just like, we celebrated her ACM nomination. I mean, and just kind of like going on your like being Nashville being like hard. I think it could be, it really could be, but I also think it can be like the thing that elevates your career. Like just the people that you meet here and the circles that you kind of, the networking opportunities, right? Nashville is its own beast. It can be intimidating, but also if you embrace that and like go for it, I think it can just be like life-changing.
It's like the way I look at it too, is like there's certain areas obviously that you want to go to if you want to get noticed. And it's like if country music, it's Nashville, right? Like I feel like if you're a comedian, like I'm not going to say like myself, but I like comedy, but it's like, you know, I'm not going to a Nashville to do comedy. It's like, I'm going to look at like New York, LA. Like, you know, if I'm in Canada, I'm looking at like a Toronto.
Totally.
Right. But like it's its own beast. It's like, you know, this is where you have to go. I feel like it's like, this is
and it's like finding community, right? Like, you know, for me, Saskatchewan has a great like country music community, but it's like very small scale and there's only so much you can do there. And so, you know, I love Saskatchewan. There's like no hate there, but it's just like my career can't elevate. In my mind, I can't elevate my career, elevate my craft until I'm surrounded with people who make me level up, you know?
That's it. Like, I mean, the whole double-edged sword of things here too is like, you know, we look at Shania Twain, for example, in Canada, or Terry Clark, but it's like, if they just kind of stayed within Canada, yes, you know them. But it's like now when you look back at it, you're kind of like, Shania Twain is from Timmins, Ontario. And then it's like, okay, but like people might just not know that because she became more successful. But it's like she doesn't lose her roots. It's not like she goes to Nashville or wherever. It's I guess it's in Switzerland she is now. But it's not like, it's like, Shania Twain is now strictly Switzerland. I'm like, no, you shut up. That is Canadian, an artist. She's from Timmins. She's done what she has to. Yes, she can go to Switzerland. It's like the same.
She can live wherever she wants.
Yeah. Imagine Switzerland like, actually, no, you're not from Switzerland. You go, and it's like, no, let her just be. But yeah, it's like that's why you forget sometimes with music, because you look at artists and you like their songs, you like I guess their albums, but I can't tell you where Luke Bryan is from, or I can't tell you where like Luke Combs is from. But like years later, if someone's like, "Did you know Luke Combs was from here?" I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of interesting." But he's like a big name in country music, so what do I care? It's like, I don't care where your hometown is, but yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. I mean, as Canadians, we're always so proud of our Canadians, like, you know, hitting that massive success, because we always feel like little fish in a big pond when it comes to like being an artist from Canada and coming to Nashville. And it almost feels like we're at a disadvantage sometimes because we're not on our own turf, right? Like we're not, like, this isn't our territory. So it can kind of feel that way. But then when one of our own like hits success, Tennille Towns, Lindsay Ell, like, you know, a lot of the girls are just crushing it in Nashville right now and crushing it in the States. And so it's like, it's just really like, we're just like, yeah, like, you know, True North strong and free. So
I want to ask you, just like on your personal interests, like, because I think it's interesting. People will tell me like, why do you ask this question? But I'm like, man, if I'm a podcaster and someone asks me like, how did you get into podcasting? Or like, you know, who are some of your favorites? Like for you, for music, like who were people that you idolized or like even took after like your musical style after?
When I was really young, Martina McBride was a huge influence for me.
Martina.
And I think Martina, and honestly, and Shania Twain, I look at those brunettes as like, because I mean, I had like a lot of people tell me like, oh, if you ever want to make it in country music, you got to be blonde. Like it just, you know, just silly stuff.
Taylor Swift,
Carrie Underwood, Miranda Lambert, Trisha Yearwood. Yeah, you know, like it was just silly. It was a silly stereotype. It really was. But when you looked at Martina and Shania, it was just like, yeah, you know, and it was empowering. So I had Martina's Waking Up Laughing album, and I can literally picture the cover, and I just like listen to it all the time. And now I'd say like Maren Morris is a huge influence for me, just being that kind of country pop crossover. I'd say that that's kind of where my music kind of lies, in that lane.
Yeah. I think it's funny because it's like, if you're a redhead that want to get into music, it's like, well, who do I look up to? It's like, well, there's Reba.
There's Reba.
Yeah. It's like, who else? It'd be like the perfect scenario where there's like someone out there that's like, fine. Like, I like country, but I want to be in TV. I'd be like, I got a perfect one for you. Reba.
Yeah. And Reba.
Like, yeah.
Or the Judds. Didn't the Judds have were they redheads?
I'm just trying to remember the other one. I think it's like I'm gonna butcher her name, but it's like Bye Bye Baby Bye Bye. It's like, I think it's like Jody
Messina.
Yeah, that's another one that like I remember as a kid watching that music video, and I'm like, man, that's a badass girl over there.
Yeah.
And it's like,
well, now there's like there's Kaylee Hammock, like she's like a fiery redhead. So like it's
funny to me because like obviously you idolize these because they've gone on to have great success, like Martina, Faith Hill. But I remember when I was younger, around Christmas time, I remember Martina's, I think it's like Runaway Bride song or whatever. It was like I Love You or something. And then I remember Faith Hill's This Kiss. But then around Christmas, I'm a kid. I just turn on CMT, and then there was like Christmas, like someone like doing a parody of that. And
This Kiss? Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah. And there's like as a kid, I was like, man, I like this video a lot better. And my brothers was like, man, you are super cheesy. That's super corny. And then when I go back to watch it, like as a 29-year-old, I'm like, it's corny. It's kind of corny, but I'm like, it's still a Christmas song to me, I guess.
I'm going to have to check that out now because I don't think I've ever seen it.
I will send it to you, but it's like
amazing.
There's this ones out there that you look at parodies and you're like, oh, like I remember watching Much Music and they had like the Cats singing Jingle Bells. And I was like, oh my God, like whatever. But
love it.
Those are the memories I have. So I'm sorry if there's like Faith Hill out there. And if you ever have Faith Hill on, I'd be like, Faith, I love you, but have you ever heard this? She's like, really? That's what you're gonna ask me? Yeah. I'm like, yeah.
My like dying, burning question is this. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like if you're in like a big press conference, it's like, Brian, you made it this far. You get to ask Faith any question in the world, and you have like 20 odd, and you're just like, Faith, did you ever hear the song This Christmas? And she's like, how did he get through all of you? I'd be like, I'm a Newfoundlander. They had to have a representative here.
Yeah.
And they're like, and that's the best they could come up with. I'm like,
that's
yes.
so funny.
Yeah. But I want to ask you, like, currently, like, who are some of the artists that you listen to? Or I know you mentioned Marion Morris, but like, what do you, I guess, kind of listen to or to make your music what it is? I know that's like a weird way of putting it, but
no, I totally catch you. Emily Wise Band has been a huge influence for me. She's not country, but she's in Nashville, and Crystal Lee showed me one of her newest.
Was she mean to you too when she said it? No, I'm like kidding.
No, not at all. She like blessed me with this amazing music. Her single "New Salt," and I was just like, oh my gosh, who is this girl? And I still like for the last year probably I've been playing her whole Spotify on repeat. Like her music is it's just different and it's unique, and she's just doing what she wants to do, which inspires me.
Yeah. So, I think it's interesting because I asked this question to a lot of artists too, like especially with country music, because when you look at the old style of country, like you had your Garth Brooks, Tim McGraw, Alan Jackson, now you see the newer ones where like I have a TV upstairs that just my parents like to watch it. And then it's just a random channel on. So sometimes it's like ET Canada. And I stumbled across it one day and it's like Florida Georgia Line with Nelly. I'm like, hold on, this is a 2011 interview. And they're like, no, they're still teaming with Nelly. And like, I get it. A younger generation probably thinks like, oh my God, Nelly and country music. I'm like, hold your fucking roll. I'm like, there was Tim McGraw and Nelly, so calm your shit. But I like that the crossovers, but like, how do you feel about it? Because when you see Thomas Rhett, Florida Georgia Line, and they're kind of like a new wave of country. There's going to be people that are like, this ain't country. There's
always going to be people like that. But what I love about country music right now is it's taking a million different lanes. It's going pop, which I love because I'm very influenced by pop. But it's also, you still have Chris Stapleton. You got Cody Johnson, who is like a little almost like mini Chris Stapleton, Trace Adkins, like you've still got that like raw, true country happening. Yeah. It's, so for the ones that are like, oh, that's not country, it's like, then go listen to Chris Stapleton, like I think what's great about country is there's something for everyone's taste now. Yeah. And it's also bringing a lot of people who said they would never love country music over to country music. Like they're coming to country music shows because Sam Hunt is in country music.
See that right there? You hear the police. That is the country police right now. They are not happy with what you said. They're like, all right, we got her surrounded.
I'm actually surprised that's the first time that's happened because I live downtown, so it's usually like a little bit more and louder than that.
They're listening and they're like, all right, she just told us to compare her to Chris Stapleton. Let's get her out of there. It's like, come out with your hands up. How dare you
evacuate? Yeah.
But no, like I think it's interesting because I haven't gotten a lot of responses on this, because sometimes you're like, obviously when you try to get interviews, some of them are so like they're big, it's like trying to figure out how they're going to accommodate the most viewership too. But then I'm like, okay, well, if I don't get to have them on, I want to ask them a question. And I think for a lot of people, when you look back at maybe what we grew up with, like to me, when I see a Dan and Shay, like I love Dan and Shay. Now there's like with any artist, there are certain songs like I don't get it, I'm not listening to it, but I'll go back and listen to Tequila. Fine. But I like to think in my own mind that Rascal Flatts kind of set a wave for these, like, right? And then I feel like if you ever asked Rascal Flatts, you'd be like, hey, Rascal Flatts, you ever hear Dan? They're like, really? We're on your podcast? I'm like, yeah. We don't talk about you at all on our podcast.
Right. Well, in Rascal Flatts, what I loved about them and what made them so different is just like the vocal runs and the vocal ability that they would bring into country music. Like they still had the country to it, whereas like Dan and Shay are, they're doing like a more pop production as well, like less banjo.
I think on their Instagram, like I'm so used to just seeing them sing, but then and one of their latest videos that they're trying to promote, which I like Spotify and Instagram for this because they're trying to like it's a new wave, obviously technology, but I'm like I think I don't know the difference between two of them, so I feel bad if I like whatever, but I think it's like Dan is singing. I think Shay is singing.
Shay's singing.
And then Dan is like doing dancing. I'm like, man, like relax. Like just do your thing. Like this doesn't need to be at a concert. It's almost like, we got some feedback on you guys. They love when you perform, but they want to see dance moves. Now they're like, all right, we got to do some dance moves. It's like, no.
I've also just heard they're like really goofy guys that just love to have fun. So I think they're having I mean, they're like one of the hottest duos in country music right now. They win awards every year. ACMs.
I've never heard of them. No.
I mean, I think that they're just like loving life right now. So if they want to dance in a video, like I'm like, y'all have fun.
Go for it. It's funny to me because obviously when you look back at like where artists come from, like if you look at the first song they ever released to now, like some of them really evolved. Like I think I can't remember the first one they ever had, but like I think when I was in university, I remember listening to one Dan and Shay song, and I was like, all right, that's cool. And then when you see them now, I'm like, damn, like okay, you do what you
totally.
Do.
Yeah. I'm trying to think back, like one of the first songs I ever released, and thinking like where I am now. It's just like, let's not listen to that.
No. Yeah, exactly. It's like some of them are really hit and miss, and then some of them I like to think of even with anything in life. If you go back to listen to like the first podcast we ever did with like Jimmy Rankin, it's almost like a teacher was telling me like, why do you sound bored? Like, why are you? I'm like, I'm not bored. And they're like, well, make it sound like you're more lively. And I feel bad because when you listen to it back, like again, you're trying to find your footing. But I think we had like the Arkells on when the Junos were in Ottawa, and one of my friends was a big Arkells fan, and he was like, you blew it. He's like, you had Max on and you sound so dull. I was like, I'm sorry. Like, I was like, I thought I sounded okay. And they're like, you should like send Max a whole bunch of flowers and an apology card right now. I'm like, okay, I will. And then I just told Max, I'm sorry the interview was bad. He's like, no, man, I loved it. I was like, I went to my friend. I'm like, well, here, you read this. Max said,
don't let anybody ever tell you that. Don't. Yeah.
All right.
Your friend was being mean.
Yeah, I gotta send Crystal a message then because it was Crystal. No, I'm only kidding. She's just like, I didn't even know you then. What are you trying to do? Blame me for stuff?
Yeah.
Like, no.
Yeah.
I want to play a really fun game with you to kind of close this interview out.
Let's do it.
And it's going to be all over the place.
Okay.
Do you remember like the first embarrassing moment of your life, whether it's like on stage or just ever?
Yeah. Okay. I've got two. And they're both music related. Yeah. So the first one I took classical lessons for years and would go into like our Spiritwood music festival, like my hometown's a music festival every year where there'd be an adjudicator and they'd be, like grading us on our performances. And I was doing musical theater, Pinocchio, Got No Strings. And my last move was like to like kind of pretend I had no strings and like sit down on my chair and kind of like cross my arms and cross my leg. And I completely missed my chair and fell on the floor. And I like recovered from it, but like walked down, sat on like just like red cheeks and like had to watch like 4 other people do their pieces. And then the adjudicator gets up and he's like, so was that planned? And I was like, I mean, just so, and there's a whole audience there, like just laughing, and they're trying not to, because like when you're in these music festival things, you're like not even supposed to like clap. Like it's very quiet, everything. Second one was one of my first ever performances playing guitar and singing at the same time. The microphone kept slowly moving down on me and I was like following it, and somebody, like I'm looking around, like everybody's watching me, they see this, like why is nobody coming up to help me?
Someone save me.
Yeah. And finally one of the like the stage techs like come over and like fixed it as I like kept singing, because it was like my first time ever singing and playing at the same time, so I didn't want to stop. I was maybe like 10 or 11 years old. Like, it was just disaster. So that was very embarrassing.
To make you feel less embarrassing, I'll give you my two, and I'll make them similar to yours. Like this mic here, when I was doing an interview with, so it was like, we have a show here in Newfoundland, but I guess it's well known internationally too. It's like Hudson and Rex. And so like I was interviewing the guy, and this mic, I was like, oh, he's telling me a really good story. So I was like laughing, and I didn't notice until I looked at the playback, but this mic was keeping on again, going down. And then I was trying to fix it. And then he's telling me this really good story. I'm like, this is going to be a great clip. And then just drops. And then all you see is me. He's like, oh, I gotta go pick up the mic. I'm like, yeah, I'm still here. I'm still listening. And then I put it here. And then I'm like, that should stay. And then it falls again. So then like, he's just there like chilling, drinking. And I'm just still like, I was like, oh my God, technical difficulties. Good thing we're not live.
That's so funny.
Yeah. And then my favorite one I tell people in terms of like acting, because I kind of like acting, but it's to the point where it's like more comedy. So we had a Christmas play. I had 2 parts. I was a mouse, and then I had to come back and recite like a big monologue. I did okay as the mouse. So I was like, okay, cool. And you're like 8, 9. We're watching Christmas movies in your homeroom. And then she was like, okay, someone will come and tell you when you have to come out, but keep it in, like, keep your watch on so you know. You're telling a 9-year-old keep their watch. Like,
keep it on. We're
watching like Rudolph, so I'm distracted. And the next minute, 2 girls come out and they're like, "You're supposed to be on." I'm like, "Oh, so I got to be on like 5 minutes?" No, the person said their line 3 goddamn times. I did not show up. So then she had to close the curtains and like basically tell everyone in the audience, it's going to be a good part. We don't know where he's to right now.
Stick around, yeah.
And my parents were like fuming. And then I come out and she
Why
has
would
to
they put a movie on for you guys though? Like you're in the middle of a play.
Yeah. So it's like, I guess just to distract you. And clearly it worked.
Funny.
So
too well.
So then she had to like mic me up. And while she's micing me up, I'm like, I'm so sorry. She's like, shut your mouth. You're on next. And I was like, oh, goddamn, I got to nail this.
Yeah.
So those were my 2 embarrassing. And then I never came back to the stage ever. It's like one of those documentaries where it's like, he could have been somebody, but this moment ruined him.
This moment. Yeah.
Yeah. What is like outside of country music? I know you kind of expanded on it, but like, what are some artists that you're probably like really into or really listening to? Like, I know for myself I'm not in music, but I go all over the place. So it's like 1975, Luke Combs. Wow. I still listen to Britney. So like, it's all over the place. The only thing I probably don't listen to is like Screamo, where it's almost like, why are you yelling at me?
Totally. And I'm more like, not necessarily certain artists, but like if I just like a song in a different genre, like it's on my liked playlist, like I'll sometimes listen to a playlist called It's a Bop on Spotify. And I come across like artists that you've just never heard of. And it's mostly pop music, but my brothers growing up, they listened to a lot of rock stuff. So like I, grew up still, and I still love Pop Evil and like, 3 Doors Down, Black Stone Cherry, like lots of like, more of their like softer rock stuff. So, kind of grew up with that influence as well. And then, a little bit of like that more punk like Paramore and like, Hailstorm, some of that influence too. I can kind of be like all over the place. I'm not gonna lie.
It's interesting because like I look at today's world and like we kind of went into it a little bit earlier about like the whole evolving of music and like I don't know. I guess with age, maybe sometimes too, you look at things a little bit differently. But like I remember growing up with like Paramore, All Time Low,
loved
Blink 182, and I'm like great. And then like now you see a new wave where it's like Billie Eilish, Olivia Rodrigo. I think that's correct. And like I look at that and people are complaining about Olivia Rodrigo and it's like plagiarism. I'm like, if you really want to go down that road, I'm like, come on, like Kanye uses sampling, like, and she gives credit. Like I think Ed Sheeran got in trouble one time because it was like Shape of You was like TLC. I'm like, that's why it sounds familiar, but I'm like, I don't really care. Like, because there comes a point where there's only so many fucking like.
I think her defense. I think her defense is that she's really young, like so she's just writing like stuff that she knows and she's not really like she hasn't really started to because when I was that age I was pretty much copying my influences, but it's interesting because when that song first came out, I just like went over to my friends because we all love Paramore and like listen to Paramore on a daily basis. Like it's Misery Business, and like I was kind of like mad about it because I was like nobody can do better than Paramore, but also she did give credit where credit was due, and
That's it. Like I just look at like again, so many tunes. There's only so much you can really sing about. But I'm like, man, if they're gonna come out as the act and say, listen, you were an inspiration and whatever. I'm like, all right, cool. Like I think the worst one I've ever heard of. I think, but I get it when you're. Like, there's 2 different sides to every story. But it's like I think Tracy Chapman was like really upset that someone like took Fast Car or like started, and I'm like, I get it.
Who was that again?
I understand it, but at the same point, it's like. If they're idolizing you, it's like, hey, now if they basically said, no, fuck you, you're not getting the money, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, that's totally different. But if they're basically saying, I'm doing this because of you and I like this song, and sure, I'll share some of the profit, then I'm like, what are you complaining about? If anything, they're making your music to another whole, like.
It's a fine line. Yeah, it's a fine line. Because, like, if you think about somebody being a painter and, you've got a certain style you know, and a vision of your paintings, and somebody sees your paintings and starts painting the same things that you paint, it's that is as the original artist a little bit like you could be flattered by it, or you could be really like, but no, this is my interpretation of my art. Like, make your own interpretation of your own art, you know? So
it's like someone doing this podcast and they're like, okay, Brian, we're going to replace you. We're going to put in this guy, but he really liked you, but he's going to do the same stuff. I'm like, well, that's flattering. But then it's like,
same thing. Yeah. We're just going to change like 2 letters. Yeah.
And then like he becomes more famous. I'm like, okay, now I have a problem.
Yeah, that would be like frustrating because you're like the OG, right? Yeah.
Imagine if someone comes out tomorrow and it's like, well, I'm not Shantaia. I'm like, I don't know, like you take out the A at the last A, and then it's just like, Shantaia. It's like she sings like instead of have a good weekend, have a good weekday. You're like, okay, I'm a little bit. What are you doing? It's like, no, I idolize you. You're great, and it's like, but still,
it's like, but really though,
really though.
Or can you just not come up with your own thing?
Yeah. It's like, okay, I'll sing about how, like, you know, when I was 13, or it was like a radio company gave me my first record deal, or let me write 8 songs. Oh wait, that was me.
Yeah.
That's gonna do it for this episode of Tobin Tonight. Our thanks to Shantaias for coming on to the show. Remember, you can find past, present, and future episodes on TobinTonight.com, Spotify, and iTunes. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and leave a comment or two. For Tobin and myself, this is Jacob saying, thanks for listening and good night.